My name is Keith, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was interested in being a part of the entertainment business. And I've done many things throughout that time, from singing in bands, writing music, hosting television shows, everything involved in the professional wrestling business. And I've written comic books, done a lot of things, and almost all of those things failed in some way or another. But I still kept going. I still wanted to continue to create. And there's just something in me that drives me to create. And I started thinking, well, what is it that drives anyone to create? And that's going to be the point of this podcast. We're going to talk to people from all aspects of the entertainment industry. We're going to find out what made them interested in creating art, and why, when faced with success, when faced with failure, the ups and downs of life and life in the entertainment business, they continue to create. So, and hopefully we'll have some good and interesting conversations along the way that you'll be interested in hearing. So tune in to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Keith. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different than usual. We are still going to touch on the entertainment industry because that's what we do here, but we're going to be discussing some sensitive issues of sexual abuse and family dynamics and things of that nature. But I think that this is a really, really important episode, and it's going to be informative, and it's going to be something that you're going to want to hear. So I would like to welcome my guest, Keeper Catran Whitney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Keith. Thank you. And very good. Kudos to you on the pronunciation of the last name.
I've been working on it. I was like, I know I can say this right. I was like, yeah.
Well, you
Usually,
nailed it, my man.
usually if it's a little hard, I ask the guest before we go on to make sure I can pronounce it. But I was like, no, I got this. So
You did excellent.
awesome. Thanks. All right. So you, when you were very young, you were part of a family singing group,
Yeah.
and you guys got pretty like quick popularity.
Right.
And what was that like at that age, experiencing something like that?
Experiencing something like that was pretty exciting. It was pretty chaotic. It was pretty, in many ways, it was just mind blowing. And how it all began was I grew up very poor, okay? I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. I lived in 21 different places, homeless three times, no place to live. And so that was a lot of my life growing up, that kind of nomad, not knowing what's coming next. In 1971, however, we could barely eat. We would have to go into the streets and find bottles and turn them in and get some money, to get a little bit of food for a family of 10. I'm number two of the 10, second oldest, four boys, four girls, my mother and my stepfather. And so in 71, my mother and her brother and her sister, they were singing, they were outstanding. They were really, really good. But as good as they were, they couldn't make enough money to pay a $90 a month rent. We could barely keep a roof over our head. So the eight of us, me and my seven brothers and sisters, we were singing around the house. Because at that time, Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, they were blowing up, dude. They were everywhere. It was ABC, Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. I mean, it was everywhere. And what little kid on the planet did not want to be a part of that group or be part of a group like them? So my mother would hear us singing around the house, right? And one day she said, would you guys like to sing? Because as a singing family, we could make more money. We're like, of course. The next thing you know, the Whitney family is born. That's my family. We were the Whitney family, and we are singing it after hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. I mean, 12 o'clock would hit. We're in this club. We're at that club. We're in this club. We're at that club. It was it. And so my life was rehearse, sing, go to school, get up and repeat. One afternoon on a Saturday, and this is what really changed everything. We're rehearsing. And we could, as I said, we are barely eating, but the phone rings. And my mother walks over to the phone and she said, hello? Who? And she looked at the eight of us and said, shh, Michael Jackson's on the phone.
Wow.
Yeah, that Michael Jackson is calling our house. She looks at the brother underneath me, child number 4, and says, he wants to talk to you. My brother grabs the phone, all excited. Hello? Uh-huh. And within a couple of minutes, hangs up the phone and screams. Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. Says, I heard and sing and dance just like him, told us to keep going. We will get there someday. Now, I
Wow.
ask you, what little kid, what little poor family could not build on dreams like that? Jump cut 6 years later, 1977. We are everywhere, Keith. I mean, everything we touched turned to gold. We were so popular in LA. We are with United Artists Records. We are concerts, magazines, TV shows. We're everywhere. Things couldn't get any better, or so we thought. The next thing you know, Motown calls. Now, Motown had lost Michael Jackson and Jackson 5 to Epic Records 3 years earlier, and they were about to complete their exhaustive 3 year search to replace them at Motown. Guess who they settled on?
You guys. Yeah.
You got it, boss. It was us. We were about to be signed with Motown with the largest new artist contract anyone was ever offered. Larger than the Supremes, the Four Tops, the Temptations, larger than the Jackson Five when they came out of Gary, Indiana. They had created the TV show for us already before we even signed. I have the pilot script in my office today. The bus was outside, man. The engine was running. The seats were warm. All we had to do was walk onto the bus. And this poor family of 10 who would go into the park to get government cheese and powdered milk and powdered eggs and food stamps and scour the street for bottles. Their life was about to change forever. We were about to go from abject poverty to not only famous, but wealthy. Everything Michael Jackson said to my brother was about to happen. Not only were we going to be famous, we were about to replace him. Good Lord. We
Man.
were so excited. I mean, that year with United Artists, we had made Billboard's top 100 not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Phew.
Singles and an album. And we were just getting started. A week before we were to sign, in fact, a few days, we know we're going to sign on a Thursday or a Friday, okay? We're ready. This is it. Like I said, the bus was outside. We just need to step onto the bus. The
Yeah.
trajectory of our life, bam, over, done. It is a brand new day. The Saturday before we signed, my sister screams upstairs, boys, come downstairs, family meeting. This is it. We're
Yeah.
about to find out what day we're going to sign. It's either going to be Thursday, it's going to be Friday. We all come running downstairs. I'm the last child to enter. When I walk into the living room, my 3 youngest sisters are huddled in the corner of the couch, not saying a word.
Oh, wow.
Now, for your listeners, let's reiterate this is a very sensitive topic. It is not going to be easy. It can be very triggering. And I'm just going to echo what Mr. Miller had to say. If you need to back up, if you find this too emotionally challenging, protect yourself at all costs. Most excellent entertainment podcasts will be here. You can come back to it. Now, my 3 younger sisters are sitting at the corner of the couch. They're huddled, but they are not saying a word, which was so odd because all they did was laugh and joke and tease. That's all they ever did. I mean, our family was so close. My mother had all 8 of us by the time she was 24. All 8 of us were born within 6 years of each other, and all we did was hang out with each other. We didn't gang bang in LA. We didn't do drugs. We did nothing. We just hung out and played with each other.
Right.
But why are my 3 sisters in the corner of the couch not saying anything? Like I said, it's really odd. I did notice when I walked into the living room as I passed the entryway, my oldest sister was pacing back and forth, not saying a word. Okay, but let me think. Okay, the girls were arguing earlier that day. Maybe that's what's going on. They were going in and out of bedrooms, and I could hear raised voices. Maybe there's my sister's still tripping on that. In fact, mom was with them from time to time, and you could hear her voice being raised. So I'm thinking my sister, older sister's mad at my mom, and they're just doing what they do. It's the girls. It's my mother, and my older sister, and they're always at each other. No big deal.
Right.
At the other end of the couch are my two youngest brothers, and they are like my three sisters. They're not saying a word except they have this look of why are people mad? What's wrong with the girls? And why aren't the three baby girls, which is what we call them, why aren't the baby girls saying anything? Okay, I'll tell you something about to happen.
Yeah.
My oldest brother is standing at the far end of the couch behind my three youngest sisters. He and I lock eyes on each other.
Yeah.
I'm about 16, he's about 17. And like I said, all we did was hang out with each other. That's all we did. And we just kind of shrugged. Okay, we're about to find out what we're going to do this deal. We're about to become rich. So I take my seat between my two youngest brothers and my three youngest sisters. Within seconds, my mother and my stepfather enter the living room. Now, my stepfather is 6'6", 250 pounds. And he wore a huge afro wig that easily put his height over 7 feet tall. He was a mountain of a man, massive dude.
Yeah.
We have a brown recliner in the center of the living room, and it clashes against this violently green carpet. I mean, it didn't match, but when you spend your life getting furniture in lots or
Yeah.
off
You
the
get what you
street,
can.
absolutely, you get what you can get. You got holy mattresses. Okay, at least you got something to sleep on. You know, your
Yep.
furniture's all beat up. Okay, at least you're not on the floor. You might be 3 inches from it, but hey, you're sitting on something.
Right.
That was us. So he goes, my stepfather, and sits on the recliner, but then he does something really odd. He bends over and places his face in his hands like this.
Oh man.
What the hell? Is he
Yeah.
sick? You know, that's what I'm thinking. Is he sick? Okay, well, cool. We're about to be rich. It's all going to be good. My mother, who's like her 8 children, bubbly, effervescent, full of life, full of energy, is stoic. In fact, there's an angry look on her face. She's this. Something's wrong. She
Right.
walks and stands in front of the plate glass window and turns around and looks at her 8 children. But when she looks at my oldest sister, if looks could kill, both of them would be dead today. What the hell? What did I miss this morning? Okay, there are material earthquakes. I live in Southern California. We have them all the time. In fact, the past 3 weeks, we've had at least three earthquakes a week. The past 3 weeks,
Wow.
we have them all the time.
Right.
And you know, as I say, they're material in nature, meaning that they could crack a freeway or they could cause trees to be uprooted or houses to crack. You know, material meaning that you can get you some rebar, get you some concrete, get you some gum, get you some spit, slap, 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 nail, 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 put it back together, get back on the freeway, go back in the house, get back to mowing your lawn. Not a big deal. Emotional earthquakes, however, hmm, that's a different matter together.
Yeah.
Emotional earthquakes you do not put back together quickly. You do not put back together completely ever because it becomes a part of you. It's part of your DNA. It's in every cell and you never forget.
Right.
My three brothers and I, because I am the author of Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents are
Yeah.
about to be hit with three emotional earthquakes. We are about to hear the words no brother could ever prepare for, ever expects to hear. Earthquake number one. My mother finally speaks. She says, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years.
Oh,
I'm a brother.
yeah.
I don't know what to do. I start dropping emotionally. I am becoming emotionally paralyzed, shock and disbelief. PTSD is engulfing me. And I have no idea what PTSD at the time, but that's exactly what I was going through. I think it's very brave of you, Keith. Let me just say this at this point to have this conversation with me, knowing that most excellent entertainment, this is not something you typically do.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly brave. I think it's showing a large amount of courage on your part to deviate in the way that you're doing. But from an entertainment standpoint, and I'll bet my life on it, you are an entertainer of some kind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we know the challenges emotionally that we go through in chasing our dreams. We know the kind of backgrounds we come from.
Yeah.
All of us have a story, and they all are intertwined with our lives emotionally and impact everything we say, do, and wish to become. We know them. We cling to them as motivation to not only move forward, but to never be that ever again. So
Yeah.
let me just say again,
Yeah.
dude,
My story is is honestly similar to yours without the brush with success. I
okay,
came from a very poor background, lived in cars. Um, my mother was a waitress. Uh, back when waitresses made less than $1 an hour in tips, and my uncle is a relatively famous singer. He's actually pretty big in Japan, so I saw that as kind of a beacon, that I can be more than this. I never was really very successful. I've done my best. I've had some good stories and some good times, but my stepfather also uh, molested my sister and used to beat everyone in the family, honestly, pretty badly. It's the
man,
first time I've ever talked about that on the podcast, but that was part of the reason why I felt like we should go ahead with this interview, because I do try to find people to come on who aren't just artists and don't just have that story, but also have a cause.
hmm
And when I found out what happened to my little sister, she's 7 years younger than me. Um, me getting hit in the face suddenly became the least of the issues. It didn't matter anymore.
it didn't matter.
And I didn't understand how I didn't know. I couldn't wrap my head around it, like how this was happening right in my house. And I just didn't know. Like, I knew that my stepfather was not a good person. That was obvious. I mean, from the things that he did to us. But I don't even know how to verbalize it, but I didn't know that he was that person.
I know.
Yeah.
When you say I don't know how to verbalize it, I know. I'm a
Yeah.
brother. I've got four younger sisters, and me and my three brothers did not know,
Yeah.
which is, before I get into the other two things, which is the reason why I wrote Helplessness, which is part of a three-book series, Helplessness to Hopefulness to Happiness. I'm writing Hopefulness now to highlight the emotional challenges brothers go through when we are not allowed to participate in one of the most important, if not the most important conversation of our lives. What happens when our family is in peril? What happens when we lose our family? Because the truth of the matter is, when we hear about it, we've lost our family. Maybe not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, but in the dream of what we thought our family was, all that is gone. We have lost them. And as we talk more about this, uh, the the inability to express, the inability to have the conversation, which in the beginning and for most of the time are a brother's only path to healing, because there is nothing out there for us. There's plenty out there for women and sisters that always have been. Even in 1977, there was something out there for my sisters. There were books in libraries, there were articles, there were every now and then there'd be a movie of the week or there'd be a documentary highlighting what women are going through. You may even get a story or documentary about the predator himself. But when it comes to the brothers, we have nothing. There are no one-step programs, there are no documentaries, there's no movies of the week. There's no counseling for us. And the same thing exists today. We have nowhere to go. And so I look to elevate the voices of brothers, to bring us into a conversation where we are told you cannot have the conversation, but you are expected to answer for your non-participation, which is what me and my brothers went through with our sisters. It took 45 years for me to find the courage to speak to them. So that was earthquake number one. My mother standing in front of us while our stepdad is bent over in a chair, hiding his damn face.
Right.
That's what my sisters were talking about that morning. It's time to tell the boys before we sign the Motown deal. It's just such a common story in entertainment. It really is. It is It is throughout entertainment and music. It is plays, actors, you name it, in sports. It is so common. So there's my mother dropping earthquake number one of three. I don't know what to do. Then my mother drops earthquake number two. She says, I have known all along.
Wow.
You've known what all along? The void has gotten bigger. It's gotten darker. I'm dropping faster and faster. There is nothing to arrest my descent emotionally, psychologically. I am done. This cannot be.
Yeah.
We have been singing for years, and every family that we know, everyone that knows of us in LA, every kid that we know wants to be part of our family because we are so tight. We are so together. We exhibit no issues. Even their parents, many of them said, I want to be in your family. Can y'all adopt me? It was like that for us.
Yeah.
It was just, it was beauty personified of what a family should be, especially a Black family,
Right.
especially a Black family. So much
Right.
so that the Republican Party of all parties called us, they wanted us to be part of their convention because they wanted us to be their inroad to the Black community.
Wow.
It's like, good Lord.
Yeah.
They said, you guys could get us there. I'm like, gee whiz. That's how quickly things were moving for us. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. Like I said, I'm dropping. But as bad as those two earthquakes are, and I'm really curious as you and I talk more and more and compare our stories, because our stories, as you said, is not something that men talk about. We travel this journey in silence. We don't tell anybody, and we
Yeah.
certainly don't tell another man because we know the stigma behind it. We know the shame that comes with it of not knowing. But me and my brothers had no idea. In fact, the molestation started in 1971, the year Michael Jackson called our house.
Wow.
It was going on.
No.
So here we are thinking we have heard it all. But my oldest sister, who was still pacing back and forth across the entryway, spins around and points a bony finger at her four brothers and says, you can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so tight, so tight, they are broken on the living room floor. I have completely lost my family. Now, as
Yeah.
I said, it's 71, and even in 1977, girls could go. find help. There was therapies, there were family counseling, there was individual counseling for girls and women. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because there really shouldn't be that kind of therapy for women. Women should be able to move around freely without the threat of some man molesting them. But here we are and have been since the beginning of time. And so my sister had access or the opportunity to find someone to talk to or something to read. My brothers, absolutely none, which is why, in order for the family to heal, we have to close the loop. We have to bring the brothers into the conversation. Brothers cannot be treated as taboo or inconvenient truth because that's what we are. And so the question becomes this. When brothers go through this, no one ever asks us, are we okay?
Right.
Do you need to talk? Is there anything you need? For my brothers and I, our sister, what she did when she told us we couldn't talk about it, she essentially told us we didn't matter. Our emotions don't matter. And as I said, the people who could help us understand something told us, go away. I don't fault her. She's doing what she had to do to protect herself and protect her sister. But with helplessness, my book, we not only explore what happens, I answer the questions. And one of the great things about helplessness is my three of my sisters, so I eventually got created relationships with again. They actually contribute to the book. I
Oh,
have two
awesome.
brothers that contribute to the book, but it took 45 years to get there, and it was quite a journey. And it's all about bringing brothers into a conversation. And oftentimes, I would just say this piece here. Oftentimes, people look at me after they realize who's written the book. And it happened twice this morning in two different interviews.
Yeah.
They say to me, okay, I don't want to make any assumptions or something along these lines. I don't want to make any assumptions, but when you say brothers, and I immediately know where to go because I've heard it so many times.
Geez. Yeah.
They asked me.
Yeah.
So when you say brothers, are you talking about? I said, no, I am not talking only about black people.
Right.
No. But
Right.
why you would go there, I have no idea.
Yeah, that wasn't even crossing my mind. That's odd.
Yes, I've heard it. I've heard it so many times, like I said, twice this morning. And I tell them, I said, if I were a white guy, would you even ask that question? But they didn't even cross your mind, and they say, sheepishly, no, it
Yeah,
wouldn't.
of
So
course.
why would you assign race to this?
Yeah.
Understand that this crosses race, religion, politics, social economics, wealth, education. It crosses borders, it crosses waters, it crosses into every country on the planet. Child sexual abuse. And in all of those instances, or certainly most, if not all, the brothers have nowhere to go for support. They have nowhere to go for understanding and nowhere to go to help them deal with their trauma.
Yeah.
Uh, and so
So
that's how my story began.
so I want to back things up just a little bit to where your sister said that it had nothing to do with you. Um when when I found out what happened to my sister, even before I found out what happened to my sister, stuff is a little different with me because my mom didn't know.
Mhm.
But my mom and my sister became very, very close. And my brother and I were sort of kept out of that relationship.
Mhm.
And we started to resent my sister. Like, why does she get all this attention? Why does, why is my mother paying so much attention to her and just kind of leaving us to fend for ourselves? And I let go of that resentment a long time ago. But my brother, I mean, I'm 50 and he's 48, and he will still bring up to this day how he feels like Amanda, that's my sister, got treated better than we did. But the thing is, I guess he can't put it into the context of what happened to her. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? I'm not happy about it, but I understand that she needed that support, but we needed something, and we had to go
Damn
find it on
straight.
our own. And
Damn
that was,
straight.
yeah,
And if you could find it at all, Your brother's story reminds me of my two youngest brothers, especially my youngest, because even to this day, the denial of what happened to my sisters is what his life is all about. He is very passionate about telling me and those of us that are talking that my sisters at 5 and 6 seduced our stepfather. Like, what are you talking about? But that's trying to, I think, in many ways, deflect the fact that we did not know. And
Yeah.
that when he found out, he never did anything. And so the trauma impacts all of us very differently.
Yeah.
And it impacts not only us individually very differently, it impacts every relationship that we have with each individual member of the family differently, especially our parents.
Right. Yeah.
Because our parents, when we're children, they are our superheroes. They are the most powerful people we know on the planet. They not only house and feed and clothe us, even though at the time all of that was being taken care of by United Artists Records, which meant we had to continue singing after
Right.
all this came out because we owed them $250,000 and they invested so much. You're like, y'all not breaking up. Y'all need to pay us back. And so we had to keep going. So with all of that as just backdrop, as you said, your family didn't have that, but that just brings into a focus just how much the trauma really impacted us. But at the same time, it does continue to show, even in your case, that when you said there, you had nothing, your brothers had no support, there were no systems, there were no tools. In fact, they don't even exist today. So
Yeah.
I understand because you're in this anxiety, you're in this fear, you're in this crisis and all this confusion and this depression and isolation. And our sister can go somewhere. In fact, I don't know why your mother and sister became so close. It did happen with my sister after
Yeah.
it came out. They became a little closer with my mother, and I understood it because my mother's trying to make up for lost time. And when I talk about this, and I do a lot of event speaking on this subject for schools, churches, events, on trauma and whatever, there's always at least one woman who will say this to me during my talk, when I'm taking Q&A. There's always one who will say, well, you know what, your sister's absolutely right. It had nothing to do with you and your brothers. You can't talk about it.
Wow.
And so I said, well, I have two things about that. First of all, it did happen to us because if it happens to one, it's happening to the entire family. We just didn't know about it. But it went a long way to explaining why certain things that we would say to our sisters and we got a reaction that didn't match.
Mm.
Like, why are you acting like that? That's not what I said. But it went a long way to explain it. The other thing is this, because oftentimes we get caught in this thing. My trauma is worse than your trauma. Mine's on an 8, yours is on a 3. We're doing this unnecessary balancing of scale with trauma scale. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So when I tell the story, okay, let me give you this and see if this makes a difference for you. 6 years before my sisters were sexually abused, my older brother and I were sexually abused by our babysitter almost daily for 6 months. So I do get it. I do understand my sister's trauma. And that's when the woman will say, oh, I had no idea. I said, well, no, you didn't. But here's the thing, I shouldn't have to say that in order
Right.
for you to understand a brother's trauma. I shouldn't have to go there. But once again, I get it. Historically, what women have had to go through. My older brother has a saying, and it goes like this: Men should just assume on GP, just general principle. Don't even think about them and ask about it, but just assume every woman you know, every girl you know has been sexually abused. Just
Yeah.
start right there.
Yeah.
Begin right there. And now build a relationship because chances are they have or they know someone.
Yeah.
It changes how you interact with them.
Yep. Every woman that I've ever had a romantic relationship with has been abused. That's an honest statement. Um, yeah, and it's mind blowing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so once things came out, was your stepfather removed from the home, or was he still a part of the
Man,
family, if you will?
like I said, this is a sprawling story, and it
Yeah,
goes 4 decades, and he is involved in a lot of the 4 decades. So immediately, in the immediate aftermath of hearing what we heard, and as I said, my sister's demand to us brothers did more damage to us than the first two because we were told we were irrelevant.
yeah,
Don't come to us. And so we were put in a box, shoved in a closet, locked the door forever. Do not do anything. Do not say anything. So in the immediate aftermath of that, my mother and stepfather, one of the reasons why they came in after everyone else is because they had concocted a plan of escape. Immediately after my mother said what she said, my stepfather faked a heart attack. And my mother got all emotional. Oh, no, no, no. He's having a heart attack. I got to get him out of here. So they immediately left the room and went upstairs. And within 5 minutes, they were out the front door. Me and my brothers and sisters did not have an opportunity to ask one question.
wow,
My sisters already knew because they had been living this for 6 years. So their processing had been ongoing. Their emotional regulation behind all of it was already in place. They knew the tools they needed in order to survive from day to day, to go to school, to play with their friends, to interact with everyone, to be on stage with all 10 of us, including him who's playing bass. They have already figured out how to survive day to day. Now, me and my brothers we have nothing.
right,
So they get out of the house. And on her way out, she says, "Don't, I will handle this. I will make this right. I will handle this." So he's gone. And we're figuring, okay, at least she's doing something. In fact, my sister told me later, our immediate thought, at least mom did something for us. We could try to build from there, but there's a lot to go through. But at least we're still together. We can still try to figure this out.
yeah,
2 weeks later, he's back. She brought him back. A couple of my
yeah,
sisters were already gone. And as I said, we owed $250,000 to United Artists in 1977, which is worth maybe a million, $2 million today to do an
sure,
album. And everything on all that they invested. So we owed a lot of money. So we had to keep singing whether we wanted to or not and navigate our sisters and those that was on the house. So my brothers and I, okay, at least we can be here if something happens. And so every now and then we'd have, a holiday or a picnic, but we would still hear how come you didn't see my tears? How come you didn't hear my weeping? Well, we're not supposed to know.
right,
You know this story. The whole idea is not to tell the brothers because if you tell your brother, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to hurt them, or I'm going to kill them. That was my stepfather. My mother was, if you do that, we're going to be poor the rest of our lives. You'll never have that car. You'll never have those clothes. You'll never have that money. You have to be quiet. So no one said anything to us boys. One of the problems for me and my brothers, and it's usually the problem for all brothers, is we are considered guilty by gender proximity.
yeah,
Because what's between the predator's legs is what's between our legs. So whether we know it or not, or whether our sisters know it or not, or whether women know it or not, there is that dynamic that comes into play, that gender proximity guilt. And it's hard to get past that. So he did leave, he did come back. And how do you deal with this?
right,
Especially for me and my brothers who were constantly being told by our sisters, don't do anything because they didn't want anyone to know. Because they knew if we said something, all their friends would know,
yeah,
their girlfriends would know, their boyfriends would know, their cousins, their aunt, their grandparents, everyone would know. And they did not want that. So they are held captive by the same trauma that in some ways they're handing to their brothers. Don't say anything. Leave it to us. So we are all trapped.
Yeah.
And it is a cycle that is so hard to bust through. And as I said, uh, brothers need something. I hear your story and your brother's story. The need for someplace for us to go, for someone to talk to, never stops.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is an example of that. And so, maybe I will tell you his story because it
Sure.
really brings into sharp relief that this is not just a black thing. Okay. Um, my father-in-law, who I absolutely love, absolutely love, I would never have thought my biological father, my stepfather, is not my father. It is my stepfather and rather my father-in-law of
Yeah.
38 years, or rather 35, because he passed away about 3 years ago. He's white. He's Jewish. He grew up in New York. He grew up in a middle class family. He had a great education. Me, I'm poor. I got nothing. I'm on the street. I'm scrounging for food. I fell in love with his daughter, and more importantly, his daughter fell in love with the drummer of all people. And so we've been married. And so
Yeah.
our relationship grows. And he knows a little bit about my family story. He knew just a little bit. 3 years before he passed away, he was 95 years old. And he calls me and he says, I want you to come to the house. I want to talk to you. Okay, Dad, I'm on the way. I'll be over there in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I get to the house, Keith, and I immediately recognize my mother-in-law is not there, which was very odd because they were together all the time. I mean,
Right.
they were in lockstep about everything, but she's not there. So he says, sit down here at the dining room table. So I walk in and sit at the dining room table. Hey, Dad, is everything okay? And he said, yeah. He says, I want to talk to you. Okay.
Right.
But his hand is on a book and he
Oh,
starts patting the book. And I look down, oh shit, that's my book. He must not
right.
like something about the book. He must be upset about something. What can it be? It's my story. It's not his story. He's not in it. No one in his family's in it. But he says, I want to talk to you. Okay, Dad. So, I shift my seat
Right.
and I sit back and he says something most unexpected. He says, I want you to know I understand. What? And then he says, you cannot tell this story to anyone until after I pass away. He
Oh, wow.
passed away 3 years ago. He's 95 and he's telling me this. You understand what? And he just kept patting the book. Understand.
Yeah.
And then he starts to cry. Tears start falling from his face. I'm like, are you okay? He says, I want you to know I understand. I'm going to tell you something. As I said, I never told anyone. The only person I've ever told was your mother-in-law, my wife. I never told my daughters, your wife. I didn't tell them this story. So I sit back. He proceeds. When I was about 16 or 17 years old, we lived in a two-story apartment in New York. We were downstairs. Our best friends and their family were upstairs. We were so close, we never locked our doors. We went in and out of each other's apartment all day, all night, no matter what. That's how close we were. It was great. One day, my mother or my dad, I don't remember, sent me upstairs to get something. So I got up, went upstairs, went in the apartment. I don't see anything. I don't see anybody. Okay. But then I hear a noise coming from one of the bedrooms. So I'm thinking, okay, the person's in there. I need to go in there. I open the door, and the father is on top of my sister. He's molesting my sister. He looks
Oh,
at me and he said, I just stood there. I turned around after a few seconds and I went back downstairs and I didn't say a word. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. My sister came downstairs. We looked at each other because she saw me, but we didn't talk. We never talked about it.
Wow.
And he's just in full on tears. And then he said, it happened again 2 months later. What? And then he just starts patting the book. I understand. I want you to know I understand. That told me how big this is. Because my father-in-law, he's 95 years old. He's white. He's Jewish. We are diametrically opposed on so many things, even though we come together almost like father and son.
Yeah.
That's how close we had become. But he didn't have to say anything to me. Not at 95. He knows he's dying. But what
Right.
you got here is a 95-year-old man still in pain. He's still in trauma.
Yep.
He wants someone to hear him. He
Yeah.
wants someone to talk to say it's okay. To say it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. And I noticed he did not go to my white Jewish brother-in-law. He did not go to my white Greek Catholic brother-in-law to tell the story. He tells me,
Yeah.
his black son-in-law. And the reason why that is because the connection of the story, like you and I, Keith, the connection is there. We understand each other.
Yeah.
We know the pain that we have been carrying in silence by not talking. As you said, this is your first time talking about it on your podcast.
Yeah.
And so my father-in-law is hurting, but my book gave him permission to tell me what is going on so I could tell the story later for him. Because why? He didn't want the shame.
Yeah.
He didn't want the stick, but he didn't want his daughters coming to him. He didn't want his grandkids coming to him and saying, Grandpa, how come you didn't say anything? How come you didn't? He didn't want that. And that's a part of it. He's a man, very successful businessman, and yet he's afraid of what others are going to say. And that's part of what others go through.
Yeah.
Because are we going to talk to another man about this?
No.
In a toxic masculinity environment?
Yeah.
What's the
No.
guy going to do? Oh, dude, why did you do that? I would have done this. I would have done that. And so
Right. Right.
even though things have gotten a lot better today, and you've got more and more celebrity men talking about their sexual abuse, and it's making it easier for people to live through them. We still don't talk about it amongst each other. In fact, me and my brothers did not talk about it amongst ourselves for 45 years.
Yeah. I don't think my brother and I have ever talked about it, to be completely honest.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We've never talked about what happened to my sister. We've talked about what happened to us, the physical abuse, but we've
Mhm.
never
Oh, we
talked about what
had
happened
plenty
to
of
us.
physical abuse from my stepfather
Yeah.
and my mother. We had plenty of that as well.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting where you guys could easily talk about the physical abuse. So could we.
Yeah.
We could talk about the spankings. We could talk about all the beatings. We could talk about being strapped down to an ottoman and my stepdad just wailing on us and doing all sorts of things. Or one night because we didn't do the dishes, the blankets come flying off in the middle of the night and my mother's just whacking with a switch. We could talk about that
Yeah.
all day. We will share
Yeah.
that all day because that's so much more of a common story,
Yeah.
not just in America, but in every country. Every family goes through that. But what we don't talk about, even on Thanksgiving, what are the rules? Don't talk politics, don't talk religion, don't talk about who's having an affair.
Yeah.
And yet they come up anyway, right?
Right. Of course. Yeah.
But this, no one talks about.
Yeah. I mean, even okay, so when the whole Me Too thing was happening, um, I finally wrote a post about the sexual abuse that I had been through, which to me, it was hard to even think about it as sexual abuse. Um, I just couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that I was actually abused. And then my mom, but being punched in the face, I was being punched in the face. You know what I mean? That was obvious.
Sure.
But my mom wrote on my post, I wish you had told me about this. I would have helped you like I did your sister. And there wasn't even like, I felt like oh, geez, I don't want to say this without, I don't want to come off like a bad person because I feel like when I say what I've felt, I may come off like a bad person. But
Dude, hold on.
okay,
You are not coming off as a bad person. You are speaking your truth. You are speaking, no matter what you say, it may irritate someone. You know, some things I say
yeah,
may irritate someone in the family, but I have to say what I need to say for my emotional well being.
sure,
So it's not a matter of you saying something bad. It's just you speaking your
yeah,
truth. And at the end of the day, the person, whoever is hearing it, they're being informed about something they didn't know about. And so you can go forward with a deeper conversation.
yeah, yeah. All right, so and this is something that I never said out loud either. I just ignored her comment. I
Hmm.
felt like she took what happened to me and used it to make herself look better and turned it towards my sister. Turned the attention back to my sister and also made herself look like if I had only known, I would have done something, Um, tried to kind of elevate herself a little bit with that comment. Um,
That
and it
comment
hurt me,
is what I have
I
found.
mean,
Yeah, because it means you have now taken my trauma, my pain, switched it around so it becomes your pain.
yep,
She said, it's now my pain. No,
yeah,
we aren't talking about you. You were talking about you, but that's a deflection. That's a protective mechanism. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So I just, like I said, I didn't know how to react. A lot of other people thanked me for it and, talked about how it wasn't something that got mentioned enough. And people reinforced the idea that I was abused. Which to this day I still have a little bit of a hard time, like, because it just doesn't. It, so the person who did the majority of my abusing was a babysitter who was 14, 15, and I was like between 8 and 10, and he ended up growing up and becoming gay. So not become, but you know what I mean, coming out as gay.
Right, right.
And so to me, I look at it like he was just a confused kid and he didn't really understand what he was doing. But I was a child,
You
even
were
if
a child.
he was a teenager, but I was a, a, a baby almost, and but it's hard for me to comprehend that. I've seen him since and we're just like, hey, how you doing? We don't even like we're
I
friendly.
I I so understand your comment. I did not recognize it for what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 10 years ago when I'm talking to my wife, because I did not recognize what my babysitter was doing to me until I was 55 years old, 10 years ago. I'm talking to my
Right.
wife about a section in the book that I'm having a lot of problems with. I'm like, this is emotionally heavy. I mean, the book is emotionally heavy and it can be very dark, but I'm having a hard time. And so we're in bed and I'm telling her about it. And she says to me, she turns and looks, you're a victim. And I said,
Yep.
no, I'm not. What are you talking about? Of course you're a victim. No, I'm not. I'm just sharing about this part of the book of what has had given me trouble. And she said, look at you. You're a mess. You're sweaty. You're shaky. Of course you're a victim. All you boys are victims.
Yeah.
I did not know until that moment, until she said it. In fact, I still didn't believe her. I did not believe what my babysitter was doing to me was sexual abuse. So the next day when I got up, I got on the computer, hopped on Google, and I typed in, I forget exactly, something to the effect that being forced to watch a woman masturbate in front of you while she's forcing you to do things to her
Sure.
and she do things to you. Is that child sexual abuse? One, about four things down. Yes. What? All that time, I
Yeah.
did not recognize what it was for 50 years
Yeah.
because I don't know that it was because I was a man, and it very easily could have been. I didn't want to admit it.
Right.
It's not something that we talk about a lot. You and I are having this conversation, and since March, I have been booked for 150 interviews because more and more people want me to talk about it from a brother's perspective. They never heard of it. Like, what? I never even considered what brothers go through.
Yeah.
And so you and I sitting here having this very candid, open conversation, two guys who are meeting for the very first time.
Yep.
Uh, we find that we have, this is crazy. We find that our childhoods have so many things in common. I'm just tripping when you talked
Yeah.
about the babysitter. Granted, it was a young man, but it's still the babysitter. I'm thinking you're going to tell me someone else, but I'm like,
Oh,
I was a babysitter.
yeah.
My sister, it wasn't a stepdad. Uh, your mom didn't know, but at some point when she found out, she started treating your sister with a little more favor compared to you and your brother. Your
Yeah.
brother's having difficulties with it. My two brothers are still having difficulties with it. We are going through the same thing,
Yeah.
and we've just been so quiet about it. We haven't told anyone. It's like my father-in-law. We have got to bring guys into the conversation. I have spoken to hundreds of men, Keith, who have told me, dude, I don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
My sister won't talk to me. How I got on the book, I went down to San Diego and Lisa Nichols. She's a very popular motivational speaker and all this sort of stuff. And she was having a weekend event on how to write a book in 20 minutes. I decided to go down there. At the time, I was really big in network marketing. There's companies like Mary Kay and Avon, stuff like that. I was really
Sure.
big in that. And so I figured I'm going to go down there and write a book on how to get that industry to get more youthful because they're just so friggin' old. And so I'm going down there to write this book. And so I'm called on stage to talk about my book I want to write for network marketing. I'm standing up in front of a room of 600 people, some another 5,000 people online, and I start being pulled in a different direction. I know the book I have always wanted to write, Helplessness, because I think my family story could help people as opposed to ending in tragedy. It will be meant to help. And I'm not going to let it be anything else, but my story is not going to end like so many millions over the history of man on a dunghill no one knows anything about, children suffering. So I'm standing up in front of this audience and helplessness spills out. And the room is quiet. And next thing I'm hearing, and I'm looking at the people are wiping their
Right.
eyes. So Lisa's like, oh my gosh, what? Oh my goodness. So I go back to my seat, and next thing I'm swamped by so many women, Keith. It was like, I can't handle it. And they're saying, I should have told my brother, I should have spoken to my brother. He should have read your book. You've got to finish this book. My brother has to read it. And I'm like, it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. So I get up and I leave the room. I close the double doors and I'm standing in the hallway of this conference room or this hotel. And I'm hyperventilating. And I wasn't ready for that. And then the double doors burst open and more women pour out.
Wow.
They're surrounding me. And more are talking about, you need to finish this book. But it was three different women to talk to just how dark this can go. Because oftentimes we speak in many ways about the challenges of mental health.
Yeah.
And I don't think our challenges are mental health in origin. I think we get there, but there's always something that happens first. What happens first is we have an emotional trauma.
Yeah.
We learn about our sisters, we've been sexually abused, and we don't know what to do. It's emotional. We don't know how to handle it. And if we can't get the support we need, we go to the next logical place, which is mental. You see, emotional health is feelings, it's shared experience, it's community helping each other. But who wants to help someone who's been sexually abused? What community wants to do that? Because you have to admit your community has a problem.
Right.
You have to admit your family has a problem, and who wants to do that?
Right.
Government shut it down, cities, everyone shuts it down. But mental health, nah, we've got a remedy for that. So when you can't get your emotional health support, like you and I, your
Yeah.
brother and my brother, we go to the mental health. And mental health is alone. You're isolated. It's logic thinking. And that's when people tell you have a mental health issue. We're going to put you over there. We're going to write a prescription. We're going to give you some medication. You're going to go through all this because we want nothing to do with you. We don't want anyone to know our community has failed you. No one wants to do that.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, how do you put a dollar figure on emotional health? You can write a pill for mental health, which means you now have a cottage industry that does nothing but that. They give you
Right.
pills, they give you counseling. So we go dark in the mental health space, and I went very dark 9 years after I learned. I gave my stepfather 24 hours to get out, or I was going to kill him because I had no other place to go.
Yeah.
You see, I had to give my sisters something. I had to be the brother they always wanted. I had to be the brother to step up because I was also failing me. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about this. When we can't do what we want to
Yeah.
do, and we're brothers, we feel anger and we feel like we're betraying them, and our self-esteem and our self-worth is taking a hit. We've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
do something, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
So, mhm.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, honestly, like I became a very logical person. I kind of shut down emotions in general.
Yes.
And until occasionally they would rise up and there wouldn't be anything I could do. I had, what they would consider to be anger issues, I suppose. And they would surface at the oddest times.
Mm.
Things would just trigger me that I wouldn't even understand why I got so angry. And even through counseling, like, okay, so my perspective of people became you're suspicious of everyone until they prove that you can trust them. And I went through counseling and they tried to help me reverse that thinking, but it's just such an ingrained part of who I am.
Because they're coming at it from a mental health standpoint
Yeah,
when the challenge
exactly.
is
It's
emotional.
healing me. Right. Right.
Yes,
I need to
it's
be,
like you guys have
yeah,
it wrong.
yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah, because you're
always,
trying to regulate your emotions. And dude, I'm so with you. The flashbacks, the trigger, there are
yeah,
certain songs that just trigger me. I might see a commercial and I see a little girl with her brother. I'm like, oh, God, gosh,
yeah,
I'm crying. The song that gets me every single time, and there are a few, but there's one song that never fails.
yeah.
Gladys Knight and the Pips, Midnight Train to Georgia.
Okay.
Going back to a simpler time.
Yeah,
We are
yeah,
trying to get back to the time before we learned of everything or
right.
experienced everything, when everything just seems so wonderful. Everything, the family is just so perfect, you know. And that song wrecks me every time because I know there were things I would have, could have, and should have done,
Yeah,
but took me years to do it because my mother said she would handle it. And my failings as a brother, it's all in the book. What I would have, could have, and shouldn't and should have done. It's all there.
yeah,
Because from my brother's perspective, I have to tell the real story of who I am in the process. And I
yeah,
think what we do, and as you and I are experiencing here together, talking about this, we realize that we are brothers.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you and I are brothers, as are so many men, and yet you and I are able to have the conversation and be truthful and open about it. The the therapy comes in the conversation.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things that have to happen when you go to healing, and I'm for me, I always think it comes with acceptance. Accepting that what happened to you, or more importantly, accepting that you are a victim, that you are a survivor. Because once you can understand I'm a victim, then you can move into the understanding of I'm a survivor. Because if
Yeah.
you can get through that, you are surviving. So you and I are survivors, as are millions of men. With that acceptance means we can now go forward in terms of finding solutions for us. But that has to be first.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is the hardest part, and that is finding someone we can talk to,
Yeah.
someone who will not judge us.
Yeah.
Because, I could go talk to my brothers, which I was so afraid to, simply because my sister said they didn't want us talking. But I was always afraid if I talked to my brothers, and I'm sure the same thing came out when I talked to my older brother. It was, dude, if I had known, I would have done this. Dude, if I had known, I
Right.
would have done that. The fact of the matter is, you don't know what you would have done. And girls coming at my sister, girl, if I would have done this, girl, if I would have done that, it's like it's all noise.
Right. Right. Right.
We just need someone to talk to. And you, you exhibiting so much courage to talk about it. For me, once I started talking about it, it became liberating.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's out there. It's out there. Now you put something in your post about your experience, but the experience with your sister, but just talking about it is empowering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really helps men turn around the toxic masculinity, the things that we deal with, that I think for the most part, society has set up for us to occupy that space.
Yeah.
Oh, little boys can't cry, don't show any emotion. You can't be vulnerable, especially around other men. That's toxic. And we set that up,
Yeah.
So I'm really curious for you. How were you able to self-regulate your emotions?
Man. Well, I do want to say just a little bit about what you said about talking about things. One of the one of the biggest things that helped me once I finally did start to talk about stuff was the acceptance. I didn't expect to be accepted. I expected people to tell me to shut up.
Yes.
When that didn't happen, that helped. That helped a lot. Um, as far as regulating my emotions, man, I went through panic attacks, OCD, all kinds of things. To be completely honest, I'm on medicine now that kind of dulls me down a little bit, which
Hmm.
I don't necessarily enjoy, but it's helped me focus my life a little more.
Hmm.
Because I was not the most focused person before I got the medicine. And unfortunately, that's what ended up helping me. All the
Hmm.
counseling, all the talking, all the exercises, all the research, all the letting it out and keeping it in, none of it really helped. So I'm on a low dose citalopram,
Hmm.
and that's what it was.
Well, we're
Um,
all different, but the main thing is that you explored all those first.
I did. I did.
You know,
I didn't even
for
get on
me,
medicine until I was in my 30s. So it took,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
and I didn't get on it regularly until I was in my 40s. So, I mean, I really tried everything I could, before.
yeah. For me, what helped was when I started writing helplessness. I
Yeah.
knew I was going to have to tell my sisters, because I don't want them to be caught off guard that I'm telling the story from a brother's perspective. It's my story, even though, it encompasses things that they went through. I know
Right.
names are changed and all that stuff, but I knew I was going to have to tell them. And I was so afraid because you can't talk to anyone about it. It didn't happen to you. So,
Yeah.
but I knew it had to be done.
Yeah.
So I called my second sister and said, "Look, I want to talk to you. I want to write a book about what we went through from a brother's perspective, but I want to tell you how I'm going about it." And she said, "Okay, come on over." So I went to her house and we're standing out in front of her garage outside and start telling her about it. And I'm waiting for all hell to break loose. How dare you write this book? It didn't happen to you boys, blah, 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 blah. Even though it's the old sister that said that, I'm still waiting for this. And I'm a mess.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said something so unexpected. Of course, you boys should write a book. Of course, you should write it. It's your story. It's not a girl's story. It's your story. Of course, you should write it. Time, enough time went by that she started to see this from a different lens. Her perspective
Yeah.
became different. Some tolerance and grace and understanding about what her brothers, even though she didn't know what we were going through, but enough time came through her later life experience to say, not everything's black and white. There's a lot of gray in everything.
Yeah.
So she showed me nothing but grace and love. I called one of the twins, and she said the same thing. But I knew I had to speak to the sister, my oldest sister, who said you can't talk about it. So
Yeah.
the next day, I'm at the house, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to do this. Buck up, dude. Do what you got to do. You cannot go forward with this book without it. So I called her, and then I set the phone down. I
Oh, wow.
disconnected. I
Yeah.
did that for an hour because something more important came up. I had to wash the dishes. I had to dry the clothes.
Right.
I had to
Right.
go outside and watch paint dry. Something,
Yeah.
I had to do something other than that.
Have that conversation.
That
Yeah.
because there's nothing there but fear. I'm so
Yeah.
scared. So the next day, I finally do. You're already prepared for her to scream you down. It can't get any worse than that. Are you
Right.
okay with that? Yeah. Okay, then do your damn job.
Right.
So I picked up the phone and I told her what I was going to do. Silence. I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
here it comes. She's winding up.
Yeah.
And then she said, okay, okay. What do you
Nothing
mean,
else.
okay? For
Yeah.
45 years, after all this, you you're just going to say, okay? She said, yeah, I think you can. I think that's okay. I think our story can help other people. I waited 45 years before approaching my sister.
Yeah.
45 wasted years. Now, there was definitely going to be a lot of blowback if I had done it much earlier. There's no question about it.
Sure.
But I needed to have the conversation. And that's the hardest part, having that conversation with my sister. And that's when the things that were holding me back emotionally,
Yeah.
they disappeared. I'm like, I'm good. I am standing in my space. I own my space. I am strong. And then in 2001, I confronted my stepfather one last time and
Yeah.
brought my sister's closure. So, yeah, it was good.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you something that is a little divergent from what we've been talking about, but
Sure.
it's interesting to me. Um, while I was researching your story,
Hmm.
I found your sister's website,
Hmm.
and it seems like she's still involved in the entertainment business, and she
Yeah.
definitely celebrates your guys' musical history. Um, and I was just wondering what that's like for you. I mean, how does that?
Oh, I
Um,
think it's great that she has continued to keep going. She's the only one who's continued to keep going. In fact,
right,
she's
that's
head of
what
the
I thought. Yeah,
musicians union in Albuquerque. She's head
awesome.
of the musician. Yeah. So she loves it. She does more jazz now than anything else, but we are very, very proud of her. She's done
Awesome.
very, very well. And I have great relationships with three of my four sisters
Awesome.
today.
Awesome. Yeah.
We're in a constant text chain all day, every day, jokes going back and forth every day. And I could not have imagined that, say,
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
so
see
she's
that's
doing her thing.
sorry, I was just like looking back on your musical legacy and then what was happening at the time. Like I don't know, when I was reading over the website, like I said, it's very much about your accomplishments and things like that. Do you still look on those accomplishments with pride, or is it hard to
Absolutely.
reconcile that? Okay, awesome.
No, you
Good.
know what's hard to reconcile. I look at it without question, without pride, because we had a great time, even in the midst of all of that. But
Yeah,
what's hard to reconcile is what we could have been,
right.
you know, what we were destined to be, or so I thought destined to be. But what really brings that back into focus is this. Let's say we did go on to be amazing and become extremely famous. What would you know about me today? We would have been part of a VH1 Behind the Music story.
Sure.
We would be a MTV documentary. We'd be an
Yeah.
HBO show, which, by the way, my book screenplay has been written right now by a studio in Hollywood because they want to bring it. They think it's an amazing story that could help. But what people would know about us is all the dark that happened through some behind the music thing, which
Yeah.
means we could never escape it. Our children would know, our grandchildren would grow up knowing all this, and it would be a part of them. So I'm grateful for my sister in that sense that she stopped that from happening. So that's the only thing that's what's not the only thing. It's one of the things that helps me reconcile what we what we could have been. I'm not going to say lost because
Yeah.
I used to think the 10 of us were brought together when we were riding high that we're going to do great music and bring the world great music. I used to think that's what we were brought together for. Not anymore. In
Yeah.
a really kind of macabre, weird way, I believe now we were brought together, the 10 of us, to experience all of that, as horrific as it was, exciting as it was from time to time, so that I could tell this story,
Yeah.
so that my sisters could be a part of telling this story to help other families. Because if we had done the music and kept going, this story wouldn't be able to touch people. You and I, probably would never have met.
Right.
And so my family's story, the legacy is now helping other families live through us, helping other men live through my story as a brother, helping other sisters live through my sisters. Hopefully, if they read the book and say, I need to talk to my brother because now listening or reading about his sisters empowers me to talk to my brother because I used to think he didn't care. I used to
Yeah.
think he was nonchalant. It's just that he didn't have space to talk. I never gave him space to talk,
Right.
to share his pain. They know all about mine, but I never thought about the brothers.
Yeah. Well, I think both of us had a little bit of hesitation going into this just because of the types of interviews that I usually do in the nature of this podcast. But I am so glad that we sat down together. Thank you for
Yeah,
doing this. And
so am I after reading about you and reading about your podcast. I wasn't sure
yeah,
that this story, my participation would be the kind of thing that you would typically benefit from. But obviously, both of us have benefited in a multitude of ways.
absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
you've got the entertainment part, and you've got the other parts, and uh, as I said, we are brothers on this same journey, and so we can help
absolutely.
other men. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I'm a little emotional to be completely honest, but just if you could let people know where they can find your book, where they can find you, that kind of thing, go right on ahead.
All right, I will help you out. I will throw
All
you a
right, thank you.
lifeline.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's all good, bro.
Yeah,
People, like I said, the name of my book is Helplessness: The Emotional Health Challenges Brothers Experience Once We Learn. Our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. But let me say thanks for taking the time to listen. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be a part of your life and your space through this conversation. You can get the book on Amazon. You can get it at my website, keepercatranwhitney.com, which there are trailers, there are featurettes, there are downloads, there are chapter readings, there are free chapter downloads. You can find resources on support systems for you. And if you want to reach me directly, you can send an email to keeper.cw .author.com, keepercw.author.com,
Gotcha.
keepercw.author.com. And uh, I, I speak all the time, and I will share this story with anyone. We just want to help, and
Absolutely.
Keith sharing his story. He's now part of the mission, so it's all good.
I'm proud. Thank you so much. I'm really proud of this podcast, honestly. I want to thank my producer Tyler and Emmy Studios for not just giving me the green light on doing this, but really encouraging me to do it and telling me how important it was that we do this interview. Keeper, thank you so much. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you got something out of it, and be sure to tune in next week for the most excellent entertainment podcast.